This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for April 30th, 2019, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Cristina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Hey, checkers.
We have a great show for you today. Cristina is going to explore some widely believed so-called facts, and I'm going to talk to you about the idea of the Loch Ness Monster. But first, Adam, what is gaslighting?
That's a great question, Darren. Have you heard the term gaslighting recently? How about 3 years ago? It seems like this word came out of nowhere and is used so often that it's synonymous with lying or discounting my feelings. I wanted to look at where the word came from, what it means, and what it doesn't, more importantly. Now, the history of the term isn't all that well hidden. Many news articles that bring up the term will include a primer on where it comes from, and I will do the same. The term originates from a 1938 play, Gaslight, by Patrick Hamilton, which was adapted into films in 1940 and 1944. The 1944 film starred popular actress Ingrid Bergman and was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. It is likely that the term originally worked its way into popular culture as a result of the film rather than the play, though these days it's not really about the movie, it's just a term people like to use. In this story, a man causes the gas lights in his home to dim, but convinces his wife that she is imagining this amongst other lies. The context in the story was not that dimming the lights was done with the intention of making his wife crazy, but rather that it was the result of him using a light in the attic in secret, and this was causing the other lights in the house to dim. So this is kind of important because I think some of that context isn't properly conveyed when people explain it. He wasn't just dimming the lights to psychologically attack his wife. It was sort of a side effect of something he was lying to cover up and also causing that trauma. Now, I was born in 1978, so I'll be honest, I've never used a gas light. I don't know about you guys. They are things that still do exist in some homes, maybe some older homes, maybe some
I've seen movies.
Yes, I've seen movies.
I meant Powered by Gaslight, those movies that I watched. Sorry if I was misleading.
I think it's kind of a retro thing for some cities to have gas lights.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting and potentially not terribly friendly for the environment, but probably makes a very cool light. Now, this is a fairly specific example, and it's hard to find things which fit it perfectly, but generally, the term gaslighting in psychology is used to describe an abusive relationship in which a person uses psychological manipulation to make someone question reality. And this uses persistent denial, misdirection, contradiction, and lying. For example, if a man assaults his wife and later claims that it didn't happen, and that she imagined it with the intent to undermine her perception or memory of the event, then this could qualify as gaslighting. Now, I got the impression that the term exploded in recent years, having first heard it in 2016, and Google Trends for the term seem to agree. Now, interest in the term is pretty flat until about 2015, with a huge spike in January 2017, and it generally rises until the present day. So, what isn't gaslighting? Now, I've seen a few articles discussing this, and I thought I'd reference these so it wasn't just me raging against the evolution of language. Now, one article by Alfred MacDonald points out that the term is often thrown around for someone discounting someone's feelings, saying that they are overreacting or being too sensitive. One can easily see how gaslighting seems to fit the bill here. I have a reaction to a situation and I feel it is valid. Someone tells me my reaction is wrong. They're gaslighting me. But it doesn't need to be. People can have very different ideas of what is a normal reaction to something. This disagreement doesn't mean that one person is trying to deny the other person's perception of reality, simply that one of them doesn't think it is as big a concern as the other. People have varying levels of concern over the same issue, so we will always find ourselves having slightly different levels of concern than someone else. We can maybe be a bit more sympathetic with others, but we aren't necessarily gaslighting someone if we discount someone else's feelings. Another article I saw on Odyssey discussed how two people who disagree on something and one tries to convince the other of a point of view is not gaslighting. Now, as I mentioned earlier, people disagree on things all the time, but that doesn't mean that one person is trying to make the other question their perception of reality. If someone believes the earth is flat and tries to convince me, a globetard who believes the globe is a sphere, of this fact, then they aren't gaslighting me. Same for global warming deniers, anti-vax parents, or whatever other incorrect worldview a person may have. Beyond factual disagreements, there are also less concrete ideological or political views which two people can disagree on, and one person is certainly not gaslighting another for trying to convince them that their strongly held belief is wrong.
Now, just a second, Adam. It sounds like, depending on how you use this definition, all of those instances are gaslighting unless you're appealing to an objective reality, which we do, which has some arbiter of the facts. Meaning, if I believe the Earth is flat, I do think your perception of reality is wrong if you think the Earth is round, and I am trying to make you realize that.
Yes, but in the actual classic example of gaslighting, and I think when you're accurately describing the term, the person who is trying to cause the person to disbelieve something knows they're lying. Okay?
So they're deceptive.
So if I think the Earth is round and you think the Earth is round, but I try to convince you that the Earth is flat to ruin your model of reality, then I may be gaslighting.
Okay, so it's
But if we disagree, that's not gaslighting. Okay? I think that kind of has...
Okay, that's a good factor. So you're intentionally trying to deceive someone to have their perception of reality changed and have them question it.
Yes. Although having their perception of reality changed may not be my intent, but it's going to be the effect that I don't care about because I'm trying to change your belief of the world. Now, another article I saw in Quillette about inflated concepts shows examples of academics using the term to describe situations where people don't even believe that they are lying. Situations include things like tone policing. So I don't think these are examples of gaslighting, but these were some kind of extreme examples. Now, the man in the story did not himself believe that the lights weren't dimming. So this is, like I mentioned, Darren, he knew that they were dimming, and he was trying to convince his wife otherwise. Now, finally, this brings me to the idea which brought the term to my attention and made me want to do this segment in the first place. That is the often repeated claim that Donald Trump is gaslighting America. So if you Google that term, you will find dozens, maybe up to 100 articles, people saying the same thing. Now, I first saw this idea in a 2016 article by Lauren Duca in Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue somehow went from a children's spin-off of a fashion magazine to a website which deals with social justice issues and complaining about Donald Trump. It gets a lot of praise for pushing a progressive message, but articles like this one are kind of terrible. Now, this was the first of many articles of the type that I saw, but this one really seems to have propelled the idea into the popular consciousness, and I think that's where a lot of the idea comes from. And the idea is really simple. Donald Trump is the abuser, and the lies he's told the voting public and continues to tell his country are a form of gaslighting. Now, I don't really think that it fits. So yes, what he says can generally be characterized as bullshit. Does he believe the lies he says? Well, that is very hard to say, okay? In some cases, he probably believes what he's saying, so these are simply mistakes on his part and not technically lies. But in some cases, I think there's a case to be made that he knowingly states things which he knows to be incorrect. So yes, those would be lies, myths, truths, whatever you want to call it. Is he trying to make Americans doubt their reality? Is he doing this as a psychological manipulation? Are people actually believing the lies and questioning reality? I don't think so.
Yes, all of those?
I think people believe the lies.
Yeah, I say
I'm
yes
go
to
with
all
yes
of
as well.
those. Yeah.
People may believe them straight up, but is it like, I have a strongly held belief. He tells me it's incorrect. I have trouble coming to terms with that. That causes me psychological stress as I believe what he's saying. That's kind of what has to happen for it to be gaslighting.
Well,
I'm not sure that's really happening.
There's a whole range of, say, audience members, right?
Yes.
Some would never believe anything he says.
Yes.
Some would always believe everything he says. Some would be in the middle one way or another.
Maybe.
And then that mixes with, depending on what he says, whether it's true, objectively true, or subjectively true, and whether he's intended or not. So there's a matrix with like all these different categories. But I would think there are cases where he is intentionally, deceptively trying to change someone's belief to something to suit his purposes, regardless of whether it's objectively true. And that might work on some people.
Okay.
But I think the larger proportion just doesn't care, and they're not going through psychological pain agreeing with him. They're actually being validated.
Now, if you guys legitimately think that gaslighting fits the bill, that's fine, and we can have a disagreement here, because there are a lot, like I said, there are a lot of articles that claim this, there are a lot of people that say this, and I seem to be one of the few people that seems to not think that this really jives. So if you guys want to hold that position, it's perfectly fine, and we can have that sort of diversity of ideas on the show.
So Adam, all three of us are trying to have you question your perception of reality. We coordinated ahead of time, and we're gaslighting.
You're working together with the mainstream media and Teen Vogue to gaslight me, and that's fine.
Now, Cristina, talk to us about some widely believed so-called facts.
With all the measles craziness and then this story that Pat pointed out to me about a church promoting a cure-all that was 95% bleach. Have you guys heard about this yet?
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah, I needed a little break from all of that. So I'm going to do something a little more lighthearted this week, although I'm sure we'll be covering that bleach story soon because it's horrific. Now, Pat sent me an AskReddit link he thought was fun. What highly believable fact is actually absolute BS? And it was fun, especially since so many so-called facts were things we've covered on TRC, but ages ago, except for one, which I'll round out my segment with. Now, it's a long thread, so I'll only highlight a few. Let's start with the first comment, which is Einstein sucked at math. Now, our friend Elon covered that on episode 180. As the site today I found out says, Albert Einstein did not fail at math in school. In fact, he excelled at math. What a surprise. Einstein himself is quoted as saying about the rumor, I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus. Now, as a frame of reference, 15 was the age in Germany that more qualified students would actually start to learn calculus. Now, there's a lot of theories about where this rumor originated, like one school he attended reversed their grading so that 6 was the highest mark instead of the lowest, and that got misinterpreted by people writing about him and looking at his school marks, but in truth, no one really knows for sure.
I believe some of it might be that what he's mostly known for is great works of physics, which weren't that heavily mathematical, at least initially, until he had to learn some extra math for general relativity. So it could be that it's a physicist who isn't as good as math as a mathematician.
Yeah, there were a few theories like that. Now, next up is the long-held notion that Napoleon was short. Now, once again, Elon covered this on episode 236. Perhaps some British propaganda at play when you dig deep into the story, but Napoleon was in fact tall compared to the average height for an adult male in France during his heyday. Again, a lot of sort of haziness around why this myth grew legs. It's said he was around 5'7", but 5'2" when measured in French units, a unit of measurement used before the French Revolution. So that could have added to the confusion. The average male in France at the time, by the way, was about 5'5". Now, Adam covered the next one way back on episode 96. Does eating carrots improve your vision? Now, it's true that carrots are a good source of vitamin A, but eating carrots does not improve your vision. Snopes handily debunks this one and relays its cool origin story, which I'm sure you'll remember, Adam. During World War II, it seems that the Brits were perpetuating this one in order to cover up a new secret radar system that was helping them attack Nazi bombers at night. Now, in an effort to come up with an explanation of why more bombers were suddenly being shot down at night, they circulated news stories about one of their top flight lieutenants dubbed Cat's Eyes, and other flight personnel consuming copious amounts of carrots. This narrative became so ubiquitous that British people started eating carrots thinking it would help them navigate blackouts.
This is one of my favorite myth origin stories. It's so great.
What's interesting about this one is that I thought I covered it, so I'm just having a false memory right now. Like, I know all the content, but I didn't do that, eh? Interesting.
Yeah.
So one more quick one before I get to the one we've never covered. I don't know if this one is still as pervasive. Checkers, maybe you can write in and let me know. If you swallow gum, it takes 7 years to digest. Now, I had to look way back for that one to episode 23 before Adam had 4 children. So gum is not special. It passes through your digestive system like other food. And the part of the gum that's the rubber base or the latex base, that's out of your system in a few days. Now, Dr. Roger Little, gastroenterologist from Duke University School of Medicine, told Scientific American, quote, "Nothing would reside that long unless it was so large it couldn't get out of the stomach or it was trapped in the intestine." End quote. Now, having said that, swallowing gum willy-nilly, not recommended. Life Science says there are several reported cases of doctors removing, quote, "taffy-like wads of gum from children's bowels." End quote. Okay, from one end to the other, let's talk about your face. Now, I may have mentioned pores in passing in a beauty myth segment, but I really haven't covered this specifically. I'm sure many of you have heard that either putting cold water on your face helps close your pores or hot water helps open your pores. Pat, you mentioned the hot cloth on the face before shaving type ritual.
Totally. The idea that you shave after you get out of the shower because it was much easier. And someone said, well, it's because your pores are open.
I repeated this myth 2 days ago.
Did you?
Yes, because we set up a new shelf in our shower, and it doesn't have a mirror on it, but has a place for the thing. And I told Will, I said, some people like to shave in the shower because the water opens up your pores. That's why I shave after a shower.
Interesting.
So you're going to tell me that I lied to my 13-year-old?
You lied to a child.
I'm going to gaslight you.
Well, I mean, we could probably come to the truth for why it's easier to shave in the shower after a shower, but I'll let you finish your sentence first.
Yes, because we're specifically talking about opening and closing pores, right?
Sure.
Now, I have had facials at spa-type places, and they say this every time they steam your face. It's to open your pores. Now, obviously, our pores are important. They allow us to sweat, which helps us maintain a safe body temperature. In case of open versus closed pores, good old Google, not as helpful as usual trying to get to the bottom of this one. There seems to be as much info purporting it as there are articles refuting the claims in your defense, Adam. Now, here's an example that comes up from girlslife.com after a quick Goog. Is it true that running your face under freezing cold water after washing helps close your pores? First word in the reply, yes! Exclamation point. Okay then, easiest search ever. But in seriousness, it's tough to find a good science mag article. So many are beauty or lifestyle magazines.
Yeah.
Now, this article goes on about steaming your face first, etc., then continues, quote, the cool H2O will close your pores back up, sealing your skin to prevent bad bacteria from camping out and causing probs. Now, Dr. Kusi Pon, consulting dermatologist for Olay, tells Best Health, pores do not have muscles around their opening to allow them to open and close. Wow. Dermatologist Dr. Mary P. Lupo told Allure magazine, cold water can keep your pores from producing excess oil, but they will never close. Now, what about steam or hot water helping to open pores? Pon says steaming might help loosen debris, and it also makes it easier to extract blackheads. But steaming or using hot water does not help open your pores, because that's not how pores work.
Look at that. Interesting.
Lupo also says steam won't cause the pores to open, but it will stimulate the oil glands. Yeah, so there you go.
Now, 2 weeks ago, I went to the Nildzig Spa for a nice little spa day, and that's the whole thing with the spa. It's like the cycle of hot and cold, and you go in the sauna, and then you shock your body, you go back in the cold, and it's I don't know,
complete nonsense.
Pores is part of that. So why my wife's telling me this, and I'm like, I don't believe any of this. I mean, it feels like it's just something to look up. What's that?
Did she just meet you?
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm not sure she's convinced either, but it's like she's kind of explaining, like, that's the idea. That's what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, I just want to go in the nice hot tub. I don't really care about doing the really painful cold thing. I don't think it's good for me. I don't care.
Right.
But yeah, that's possibly worth looking into in the future. But it sounds like you covered half of what that would be. So
yeah, I just assumed it was true as well. So.
Well, I knew the Nordique thing was terrible and wrong the one time that I went, because it had far more about the toxins and releasing this in the toxins, and it didn't mention the pores as heavily. The pores thing is interesting, Cristina. I kind of just assumed this was true. I don't know if it really affected my life in any way. And I wonder if it's sort of maybe the rough analogy people think, like, well, if I'm trying to keep an inflammation down, I use ice, because it stops the swelling. Yeah. So cold makes things smaller and shrinks them, while warmth sort of elongates in some broad way, and then we think it happens to our pores, which apparently it doesn't at all.
I still feel like I get a better shave after my shower, but there may be other reasons.
Well, that could be your skin now has been changed through the warmth and the water.
Well, yes, but it's also that your whiskers have been softened by the hot water.
Yes.
And I think that's why it happens.
Thanks, Cristina. And now I wanted to talk to you about the idea of the Loch Ness Monster. 5 years ago, Adam did a segment on the Loch Ness Monster, examining whether it actually exists, and there is no evidence that it does. Thanks, Adam. No need to revisit that, but I want to talk to you about the idea of the Loch Ness Monster. When you're young, you wonder if these things are true, and then you find out they are not, but then you sometimes start to wonder why other people think they are true, and how those particular beliefs came to be. First, to clarify, loch is the Irish, Scottish, Gaelic, and Scots word for a lake or a sea inlet. It is in the Scottish Highlands, Loch Ness. Certainly, I think exoticism helped the whole idea of this. The Lake Ontario Monster sounds really silly to me.
Well, it's Ogopogo, but... Yeah.
And the Lake Ness Monster just doesn't sound as interesting or plausible.
Yep.
Second, why do people think of the Loch Ness Monster as a long-necked, almost dinosaur-like creature?
Ugh, that damn one photo that was on whatever, what's the name of that show? That's Incredible, or whatever that show is.
Right, and I'll also pause to let the true believers at home yell out, because it's true! It actually is, you fools! Again, there's no evidence, so why is it? Part of the answer may come from a recent paper published in the journal Earth Sciences History by Charles Paxton of the University of St. Andrews and paleontologist Darren Naish of the University of Southampton, who used statistical techniques to pull out trends in reports of sea monsters dating back as far as 1801.
I'm sorry, Darren, I have to interrupt because I stand corrected. It's the show, and you guys will remember, Pat, you'll remember this, In Search of...
Leonard Nimoy.
On the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen either of those shows, but thank you for correcting yourself so you didn't have to write in. They looked at over 1,500 supposed sightings of monsters and found that in the early 1800s, about 10% of these reports had monsters with long necks similar to plesiosaurs. But in the 1930s, that number was about 50%. The Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie, was discovered in July 1933 when George Spicer and his wife said he saw a most extraordinary form of animal cross the road.
Cross the road?
I know. I know, that's an interesting one, right? 25 feet or 8 meters long with a long, narrow neck and no visible limbs, which is interesting because it supposedly left a trail in its path, so-called, of destroyed vegetation. All my understanding of Loch Ness Monsters is in the lake, not something like a small brachiosaur walking along.
Yeah.
Later in November, a photo was published, not actually one, and then in 1934, that famous photo with the head and neck that Cristina referenced that you might have in your head was published. Of course, now it is thought to be a hoax. Anyway, the researchers found that reports of sea serpent monsters went down as reports of long-necked monsters went up. But not that the proportion of mosasaur-like monsters changed.
Mosasaur?
Yeah, picture a shark with kind of arms like fins.
Cool.
Yeah. It was in the decades prior to the 1930s that dinosaurs were first displayed in museums in Britain. Thus the idea that, and this is quoting Paxson, the discovery of long-necked marine reptile fossils in the 19th century does appear to have had an influence on what people believe they spotted in the water.
Yeah.
Further, another quote, the problem is an interesting fusion of history and paleontology, which shows that statistics can be used to rigorously test all sorts of strange hypotheses if the data is handled in the right way. And where did this even come from? Well, from the London Economic, and this is linked in our show notes at trcpodcast.com.
It's a great website.
The research was inspired by science fiction author L. Sprague de Camp. In 1968, de Camp suggested that after Mesozoic reptiles became well known, reports of serpentine sea monsters became replaced with marine reptiles such as a plesiosaur or mosasaur, a creature with, here you go Adam, shark-like tail and flipper limbs.
Cool.
And I thought this was interesting. It also reminded me of something I think I got from Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World, which talked about how our image of what an alien is was highly influenced by TV and movies, and that the idea of certain alien sightings changed dramatically from when there weren't TVs and movies about aliens, which with their big heads and so on, to after the fact. And it's sort of like, again, like, why would someone picture any sort of serpent monster? Well, there's a snake, and the darkness of the water is unknown. Snakes are terrifying to primates typically. That kind of makes sense. Why would they suddenly have a long neck? Is there any organism that has a long neck? Oh, this dinosaur thing. Now that the idea of a long neck can even exist in the mind. And so I think that's kind of interesting of why this might have come to be. And it seems like, I know it's somewhat informal in terms of reports, which are both firsthand and some in newspapers and all these other types of accounts, but they did try to use some data analysis and showed that the reports changed over time, especially around the 1930s when Nessie fever was in its heyday.
Yeah, and beyond aliens, there's also UFOs. So depending on the depiction of crafts in movies, alien crafts, that influences, I guess, the frequency of sightings and the type of sightings that people seem to find. And, you know, going with that, you can say, well, yes, it sounds like these are not real
And
Right.
Adam and I were talking before the show, and he had an interesting point with all the cell phones nowadays.
Yeah, this might have been something I touched on last time, but definitely in the 5 years since, it becomes more true, which is everyone has a phone in their pocket now. Video camera and HD camera. Loch Ness sightings have gone down significantly. You've got no excuse here. There's no excuse for your picture to be blurry. So, and that's, I think, affected many things, and Loch Ness is sort of the poster boy for that phenomenon.
I like some comedian's bit that said the Bigfoot is actually blurry. All the photos are accurate.
Be like, I was on portrait mode. How are you blurry? It probably depends on the distance.
Well, you make a good point. That where are all the cell phone footage of ghosts and miracles and whatever else?
Angels,
that people
all these things.
make claims.
Thanks for joining us, listeners. And today, Adam told you about what is and isn't gaslighting, and we semi-agreed with him. I think we all gaslit each other in that one. Yep. Cristina ran through some widely believed so-called facts, the most interesting of which was the whole poor thing. Thank you. That was interesting. Mm-hmm. And finally, I talked to you about the idea of the Loch Ness Monster. It's still not real, but now we might know why people might have seen it. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, cuboids.
Stay classy, not smartassy.
We'll talk to you next week, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Or Animal Farm, one or the other.
Oh,
Animal Farm. That was it.
I never read Moby Dick, so I wouldn't have caught
Moby
that
Dick, Animal Farm. They're kind of the same. They both have
To be fair, they both have animals.
Oh, boy.
You said cross the road, but in Scotland they say Loch Ness.
Loch Ness. Patrick, is a good one.